This is the Chris Stigall Show podcast.
Okay, guys, let's just rip. And Chris Stigall.
Chris Stigall. Chris, thanks for being with me tonight.
Chris Stigall.
I'm joined now by Chris Stigall.
Now, he puts the broad in broadband. It's Chris Stigall.
The Chris Stigall podcast is presented by usmedicalplan.com. Save big money monthly and get better health coverage at usmedicalplan.com.
Hey there, happy Valentine's Day. It's Tuesday, February 14th. Thanks a lot for downloading the Chris Stigall Show podcast. Thanks for your 5-star reviews and your written reviews. If you haven't done that at Apple iTunes or Spotify, I really owe you big time. If you don't mind scrolling down to the bottom of the menu of shows in Apple iTunes and giving us 5 stars, it helps us grow and spread the good word. Thanks for your written reviews. Those matter a lot too, because people who are looking for new shows to listen to trust your reviews more than me just talking about how great the show is. And it's great. We have a good one today, as a matter of fact. Spencer Klavan is with us. If you don't know him, he's got a brand new book called How to Save the West, Ancient Wisdom for 5 Modern Crises. Fascinating guy. Great topic. The book is just out today, so I haven't even gotten my hands on it yet, but I do have some bullet points about different chapters and what it's about. And it dovetails perfectly with what we're going to get into today. The headlines are, I don't know how to say it, dark. And while every day under a Democrat administration feels pretty dark, lately, really, I'll just put it mildly, dark, weird, curious things seem to be happening that I just can't help but stitch together. So we're going to do that today, but I don't want to leave you feeling depressed and deflated. This is actually, I think, a different way to look at the news in its totality and a lot of behaviors of the left. So that's coming up with Spencer today. And I think you're really going to enjoy the conversation. Just trust me on that. First, let me tell you about the guy that makes this show possible every day, and a guy that I hope, most of all, saves you money. John Ruhlman, he runs usmedicalplan.com. usmedicalplan, that's singular.com. And if you're trying to save money, who isn't right now? Health insurance, if you buy your own premiums, that's exactly where to start. That's the easiest phone call to make. You pick up the phone and you tell John Ruhlman or his team at usmedicalplan.com, what are you spending a month in health insurance premiums for your family or for you? Or maybe if you own a small business and you buy your employees' health insurance, what are you spending a month? Give John and his team like a couple of minutes of your time and just say, here's my coverage, here's what I'm paying, is there something better? John is networked with 80 different private health insurers. He's also masterful in the ACA world. That's Obamacare. And if maybe there's a different route you can go to get as good of coverage, but at a lesser rate, he'll work to do that. People that I know that have taken the time to pick up the phone and get in contact are saving hundreds of dollars a month, in some cases over $2,000 a month. It's like devastating savings at a time we need money saved. So please reach out to John. If you buy your own health insurance, you don't know how much you could save. Look, maybe it's the best you can do, but I'll bet you John can do better. And the customer care department at usmedicalplan.com is exceptional. If you're going through some big private insurance company hassle right now, call John and say, hey, look, here's the trouble I'm having. Can you assist? Is there a better way forward? These guys are pros, and they have a whole care department. That's really unusual for people that deal with private insurance. But that's what they want to do, assist you and become your partner in getting the best rates and navigating the bureaucracy of private health insurance. 877-410-4321, 877-410-4321, or usmedicalplan.com. Tell John and the team you heard it on the Chris Stigall Show podcast, if you please. I don't know if it's just me. I doubt it is. In fact, I'm certain it's not just me because I tweeted it yesterday. And it seems like everybody is sensing the same thing. Again, it's coincidence. It's nothing more than coincidence, or it's just common sense, and people just are living life out there and experiencing the same thing that you and I are. But when you kind of pay attention to the news for a living, it's hard to just kind of not acknowledge it all at once. Multiple train derailments, multiple spy balloons or objects flying through the air, electrical grid and pipeline explosions and attacks, food supply factories catching fire and blowing up, and planes crashing into them. Dead whales. You know, there's now an 8th dead whale that is washed up on the New Jersey shore. It seems that there are an awful lot of people fanning the flames for a hot war with Russia. I don't know. I didn't know how else to say it other than this all feels a little dark and heavy, doesn't it? Feels like there's a lot going wrong at once at a high volume. Like, it's getting kind of dire, for want of a better term. And I just say that, not to mention, again, the continuous open border, the inflation. I just see the husk sold off another 30 million barrels of oil from the strategic oil reserves. You starting to feel like the people that run this country don't have our best interests at heart? Boy, I sure do. United States urges citizens to leave Russia immediately. Biden administration urging citizens leave Russia without delay, warning of unpredictable consequences, including detentions as a result of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. State Department issuing a travel advisory set at the highest of 4 levels ahead of Joe Biden's expected visit to Poland to mark the anniversary of the assault's beginning. Why would we need to mark the anniversary of Russia's incursion into Ukraine? Why is that worthy of a... Why are we marking the anniversary? Aren't we at present in the middle of conflict? When have you ever heard of an American president effectively visiting the middle of a war to mark the beginning of the war? If, in fact, that's what you believe this is, a war. Meanwhile, some Republicans blaming the vaccine or wokeness for the Army's recruitment woes, but the military says service hurdles are bigger than just the traditional ones because young people just don't want to die or get injured or deal with the stress of Army life and put their lives on hold. Headline: Army sees safety, not wokeness, as top recruiting obstacle. Addressing those long-time issues has taken a greater urgency with the Army as they try to recover from their worst recruiting year in decades, a situation aggravated by the tight jobs market. The Army is offering new programs, advertising, and enticements in an effort to change perceptions and reverse the decline. The Army fell about 15,000 soldiers, or 25% short of its 60,000 recruitment goal last year. All branches struggled to meet recruiting goals. Army Secretary said the Army has set a difficult goal for the year, aiming to bring in 65,000 recruits, which would be 20,000 more than in 2022. It's difficult to predict how it will go, she said, adding recruiters need to do all they can to surpass last year's numbers. Meanwhile, I hear that we fired on this unidentified object over Michigan, fired 2 Sidewinder missiles at it because we missed with the first one. $400,000 a missile. $400,000 a missile, and we just missed what they still say they can't identify and they can't find. And by the way, we don't know where the missile went. I know I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone because I've got you and I come here every day and this is what I do for a living. But this is all a bit much. As I look at the cacophony of these disaster stories, I say to myself, this can't just all be coincidental. At some point, you have to look at all of this and say, you must be purposefully destructive. This is an achieved destination. This is not all happenstantial accidents all at once. We're achieving these things. And by we, I mean the United States government or whoever's in charge. These are things that are being achieved. These are not things that are just happening. You have to conclude after a while that these are things that are on purpose or made up or a combination of both. I, for instance, will just tell you now, I was being sarcastic yesterday. Let me try to drive it home with a little more pointedness. I don't believe any of this shot unidentified objects out of the sky stuff. I don't believe it. And I'm now to a point where I quite literally do not believe anything coming out of the White House or the Pentagon, particularly as it relates to shooting down unidentified objects. I don't believe it. I am 100% sure that Chinese spy balloon story was so devastating. I don't think we even know the levels of devastation that did to Joe Biden. And the reason I think that is because he spent less than a full minute on it just a couple of days after they shoot it down off the coast of South Carolina. He spends less than a minute on it in the State of the Union. Think of this. I was really ruminating on this before the show began. And this is another one of those things where I just can't let it go. And as a country, we're going to let it go. We're going to move on because that's what we do. In a constant 24-hour news churn, we'll move on to the next thing. But yet again, much like COVID, I told you, I'm not dropping the balloon thing. I'm going to continue to come back to, does everyone know what we just went through? Does everyone understand what we just allowed to happen? 7 days of a surveillance vessel from China floating over our military installations, the entire lower 48 surveilled for 7 days at a slow pace, their pace, steering this vessel over installations, steering it where they wanted to go, and then we shoot it down off the coast after it's taken a full 7 days of surveys of the ground beneath. Even if you say, and I know there were so many people that were so quick to dismiss it. Well, Stigall and TikTok, and they've infiltrated our universities. They've been spying on us for years. What's a balloon? What can they learn? It isn't even really about what they learned. It's the fact that they could. It's the fact that they did. It was the single greatest symbol to the American people. We're owned. We're owned. We're neutered, whipped puppies. We're owned. And we're living a unique set of circumstances here in the United States that we've never seen before that are all destructive, all bad. All bad. Nothing good. Point to the thing that's good and positive, strengthening the country. From military recruitment to economic to infrastructure, we've had multiple reports now of planes nearly slamming into one another on runways at major airports in the last few weeks. Train derailments. Where is our transportation secretary, Mayor Pete, exactly? Where is he on these things? Well, I see that yesterday he was discussing racial disparities in construction. Not making it up.
First of all, we're working together.
To work with your contractors, to work with your community colleges on building a workforce that reflects the community. We have heard way too many stories from generations past of infrastructure where you got a neighborhood, often a neighborhood of color, that finally sees the project come to them, but everyone in the hard hats on that project looking like, doing the good paying jobs, don't look like they came from anywhere near the neighborhood.
Right.
You can build community wealth that will help close wealth gaps in this country if we can tear down those barriers. But that happens at the delivery level.
Right. That's yesterday in the midst of 3 train derailments. And on the heels of the last 2 weeks of planes missing one another, nearly missing total full-on crashes on runways at major airports, for instance. Not to mention the Southwest meltdown, which he was made aware of, that Southwest had a system problem that was probably going to collapse at some point. That just happened a couple of months ago, lest I remind you. What's going on here? What's going on here? Once again, these are just stories laying in front of me. Let me just read today's headlines. Stories I printed today. United States urges citizens to leave Russia immediately. Army safety, top recruiting obstacle. Dead whales wash ashore, 8th since December in New Jersey. East Palestine train derailment, full of toxic chemicals, by the way. That's a hot mess that nobody's talking about at all. Biden to sell 26 million barrels more of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. California's grid faces collapse as leaders push renewables, electric vehicles. Oh, by the way, Pennsylvania senator is doing fine, but I didn't get to this headline yesterday that now that he's out of the hospital, they did want you to know that Fetterman, your United States senator in Pennsylvania, when he hears people talking, it sounds like the Peanuts characters, the adults in the Peanuts cartoons talking to him. So I know the Husk gave the State of the Union just a week ago today. That's the real State of the Union. Not to mention inflation. And again, wide open borders. And crime. You would have to try. I mean, I conclude that you would have to try to make things this bad. Did you hear what I said? You'd have to try to make things this bad. And while I can't really prove it, we're all living it and we all know it. And we move from the next tragedy, the next event, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, never really able to ruminate on the thing at present, which is outrageous. Things like 7 days of a Chinese spy vessel flying over our country. So, as I say, I don't believe anything coming from this administration. I don't believe anything coming from official Washington. I don't believe that they shot anything out of the sky. I think they completely made it up. If you want to know and I used to, folks, this pains me because I am not a conspiracy guy. I hate it, actually. I hate conspiracy people. I can't stand them. I think they make people mentally ill, drive people nuts. I think it's done a lot of damage to a lot of people. But what we've seen, the high level of collusion with social media over the last few years, what's now been busted wide open and proven, thanks to people like Elon Musk, that our government is willing to literally manipulate and or hide and or ban information from us that we're not allowed to see. So, too, I believe people like that are perfectly capable of making up information. And I think that Chinese spy balloon business was so devastating to the White House and their political popularity, their polling. They still track this stuff. How are we doing with folks? Are we losing the public? And as such, they need to now show their robustness of strength. So they went out there and they started beating their chest that we're shooting things out of the sky right and left. And I was having a little fun with that yesterday. But let me drill down and be a little more specific. They made it up. They didn't shoot anything out of the sky. They completely made this up. You don't lose a $400,000 Sidewinder missile. You don't just lose it. I don't accept we don't know where it is. I don't accept that we don't know what we shot. I don't accept that we don't know where the thing is that we shot down. We have no remnants of anything. We lost a missile, and we have no trace of the thing we shot down, and we can't identify what it was. But we're just supposed to believe it. Why? Why exactly? Because the Pentagon said? Because Karine Jean-Pierre said it? Why do you believe anything anymore? The news said it? David Muir on ABC Nightly News said it, so it must be true? I can't be expected to believe this at all anymore. And I won't. What I see is real destruction in front of our faces. What I know that you're living and what I'm living is actual real destruction. And I think the rest of this stuff, anything like we shot balloons out of the sky, is it aliens? We actually had a serious conversation yesterday at the White House. Can you confirm it's not aliens? Seriously. Listen to this.
I just wanted to make sure we address this from the White House. I know there have been questions and concerns about this, but there is no indication of aliens or extraterrestrial activity with these recent takedowns. Again, there is no indication of aliens or terrestrial activity with these recent takedowns. Wanted to make sure that the American people knew that, all of you knew that, and it was important for us to say that from here because we've been hearing a lot about it.
Sometimes I just back away. And I kind of look at all of the stories every day. I just kind of back away and go, okay, what's going on here? What's the theme? What's the thread? Here's the thread. Chaos. chaos and a whole heap and helping of gaslighting. So real destruction and then gaslighting to distract you and me from things that are real, things that we're actually living versus things that we can't see, but make the administration look good. Like a good old-fashioned war in Russia, for instance. We're getting tough. We're getting tough. We're doing stuff in Russia. We're getting tough. We shot down balloons. We don't see any of that. None of that's stuff you and I cannot touch. We can't see. We just have to take the beady-eyed John Kirby or Pepe Le Pew's word for it. We're just supposed to take their word for these things. But this is meant to show strength. It's nothing we can feel or see or touch. We just have to take their word for it. They're on the case. While people in East Palestine, Ohio are sucking toxic fumes and whales are washing up on the shore. Train cars are derailing. Planes are nearly crashing. Food production facilities are blowing up. Electrical grids and pipelines are under attack. A border is wide open. The economy is in a shambles. Recruitment numbers for our military are falling through the floor. I don't know, folks. I'm not a gloom and doom guy because I have the love of Christ. I have the firm foundation of God and his word, and that's what I stand on. And so I don't despair. I'm not gloom and doom. I'm not all is lost. I don't despair about these things. I look at them and I say, we have obvious real problems here. And I think anybody that is duped into thinking otherwise is just that. They're being duped. They're being distracted. You've got to be smarter than this. I mean, you got to have your head on a swivel. These people are not telling you the truth about the chaos that we're living. They're trying to distract you with things like Russia and balloons and or not aliens we shot down over Michigan. I'm not falling for it. I know you're not either. That's why you're here. Okay, how are the finances looking this year? It's a tough time for everybody, and making sure you're financially squared away is critically important. You're looking in the rearview mirror to last year, thinking ahead to 2023, and if you're ready to review your financial situation, I hope you do it with Jason Perrette, financial advisor at Eagle Wealth Planning. He's got a passion for this stuff, providing financial services if you're looking to pursue financial independence, true independence, whether you're in retirement, whether you're brand new and just starting out, or you have no retirement savings at all. You're just kind of wanting to get a start, or you're not really happy with who you currently have as an advisor. Jason focuses on producing consistent results for his clients based on their unique financial goals. His main objective is to help you pursue each and every one of your goals. Because he's a fiduciary, he provides clients with complete wealth management and investment services, and it's very personalized and professional. So he can help accomplished entrepreneurs, professionals, retirees, and like I said, even young people get started on pursuing financial independence for the long term. He regularly checks in and revisits your goals too, and assess your risk tolerance and strategies to provide you with a high level of service at the same time. And Jason often likes to say, look, sometimes maybe we're not a fit. I mean, you got to get to know him. He's got to get to know you, and maybe sometimes your goals aren't his. He's got a long-term strategy for your financial health. And so if you want to reach out and talk with him about a new way forward, I hope you'll call today, 816-394-8117, 816-394-8017. Eagle Wealth Partners is linked to my website, by the way, at chrisstigall.com. So if you want to go to chrisstigall.com, you'll click on the website there, and it'll take you right to Jason. You can email him, Jason at eaglewealthplanning.com, eaglewealthplanning.com. Have a discussion about the way forward with your finances. Securities and advisory services offered through Cetera Advisors, LLC, member FINRA, SIPC, a broker-dealer and a registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. Just a quick follow-up to, I am sitting down and going to write more in detail on this He Gets Us campaign. I talked about this last week. I spent more time on it than I really intended to, quite frankly, because I get it. Issues of theology are, for some of you, a turnoff. For some of you, you're very passionate about it. And of course, then there's the matter of, this is a very diverse faith background in this audience, and I respect that. Different denominations, Protestants, Catholics, Jews. I get it. So I don't like ruminating for extended periods of time on theological stuff. Number one, I'm not qualified. I'm just a Christian trying to do my best. But number two, I get it. There are people that disagree, and it's, on points of both minutia and then bigger kind of theological doctrine. And again, I'm not a professor in some kind of seminary, so I can't really hang with these conversations at a deep level. But I know I'm on to something when the likes of Joy Reid and AOC surface. Both Joy Reid and AOC are attacking the "he gets us" ads too, but for an entirely different reason. And if you, for some reason, don't know what I'm talking about briefly, there is a large foundation in the Midwest that is funded by billionaires. Some of them are the Green family, the Hobby Lobby owners. They're the only ones that have been public about it. And they're the ones that dumped a ton of money into the "he gets us" campaign. If you've seen it on billboards, you've seen it on commercials, you saw it during the Super Bowl, millions and millions and millions of dollars. And as I was transparent with you about this, I was approached along with many other media outlets. And I think what bothered me most about it is I saw a lot of my colleagues in media promoting this campaign because I know what maybe you, the consumer, don't know. We were all offered money to do it. Now, as I said, I'm not holding myself out to be some sort of virtuous guy. I'm not also suggesting that anybody that took money to endorse the "he gets us" campaign are bad people. Look, this is a commercial interest that we're all in media, so yes, it takes advertising dollars to sustain us. I take money to endorse products that I like and subscribe to. I certainly love the word of Christ. I love talking about my relationship with Christ and my Christian faith. But on this, number one, I felt kind of gross taking money to talk about Jesus. That's not something I feel I need money to do. That's first. But number two, I don't think the driving factor behind this campaign and these people generally, not anyone in particular, I'm not calling out the Green people. I think maybe they are, in fact, even well-intentioned. Fast Eddie and I were talking about this yesterday offline. Just because you're wealthy and Christian and traditional and a lot of people know you as such, that doesn't mean you can't be led astray. It doesn't mean when you have a ton of wealth and you throw a bunch of money to somebody because you think it's a good cause, that cause can't get off track. We see it all the time. So, I mean, I know some very wealthy, successful people who I think are very principled people that I trust, who have gotten into business or funded things or contributed to entities and causes or people that are not quite aligned with them. And it kind of got off the rails before they knew what was going on. So, look, is the intention, if it were purely the intention of, hey, despite all of our travails and troubles out there, Jesus loves you and Jesus loves me, if that were just purely the intent, okay. But I don't think that was the intent of this ad campaign. I think the intent of this ad campaign and the people that made it, and it was made by a Chicago-based ad firm, I think the intent of it was sort of a lecture of sorts. I think it was an intended message that anyone who opposes things like non-traditional, or anybody who opposes things like gender transitioning for children, anybody who opposes non-traditional marriage, anybody who opposes open borders, that you're bad people, that you're not Christ-like. And I reject that. I think this was a political lecture, is what I think it was. The message in particular, I said to you yesterday, the Super Bowl ad, one of them was, he, meaning Jesus, he loves the people we hate. I think it was. Did I get that about right? He loves the people we hate. And what I said yesterday, and I want to be very clear about it, is I don't hate anyone. In fact, I am very, very specific. When I use that word, I listen to myself and I catch myself. I used to kind of casually say it, and I try very hard never to say now, I hate him, or I hate them, or I hate this or that, because that's a heavy, loaded word, and it should mean something. And I don't, in my heart, do I loathe? Do I dislike? Do I not support? Does it disgust me, a lot of the left's politics? Yes, all of those things are words that are true. But when I say something like, I hate Joe Biden, I don't know Joe Biden. I don't know the man. I don't know his family. I hate his politics. I don't know him to hate him. So when they say Jesus loves the people we hate, again, it's sort of this admonishing, lecturing tone. And I sit on the couch watching that, and I say, well, I don't hate anybody. I agree Jesus loves everyone. I sincerely don't have hatred in my heart for anyone. Now, juxtapose that with what the left's opposition is to the He Gets Us campaign. Joy Reid went on TV to talk about this, and here was her take on the campaign.
There were the ads, which in my humble opinion were really not that great this year. But two from a group called He Gets Us really stood out, telling viewers to be childlike and urging us to look past our differences with the tagline, Jesus loved the people we hate. But what those ads didn't tell you is who is behind the He Gets Us campaign. It's part of a $100 million campaign to help promote Christianity and build the brand of Jesus, according to its backers, because his brand has really just never been built before. Most of its donors are anonymous, of course, but David Green, founder of Hobby Lobby, the craft store with a history of funding right-wing religious causes, is a donor. As Lever News points out, He Gets Us is a subsidiary of the Servant Foundation, a Kansas nonprofit. Adding that, between 2018 and 2020, the Servant Foundation donated more than $50 million to the Alliance Defending Freedom, a group that has led fights against abortion and non-discrimination laws and is designated as an anti-LGBTQ hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. The Alliance Defending Freedom drafted the Mississippi law at the heart of the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade. And they're currently behind a Texas lawsuit seeking to reverse the FDA's approval of the abortion pill, mifepristone, and to ban the drug nationwide. In other words, it's not as apolitical as He Gets Us claims. And I think it is fair to say Jesus Christ wouldn't spend millions of dollars on television ads promoting his image. I mean, but who knows? Next year, if his brand is sufficiently promoted, maybe he could find a way to improve the officiating. Just saying.
Right. A few things. Number one, you talk about a complete non sequitur. I don't even really understand throwing in officiating at the end of it as though that has anything to do with what she just said. I mean, that's not even I mean, you can complain about officiating. That's totally fair, but that has nothing to do with what she just said. Okay. I'm working backwards because she said a lot there. But this is the salient point here. Do you notice the distinct difference in the way I criticized He Gets Us versus the way Joy Reid criticized He Gets Us? She just laid out an entire case as to why the people behind this campaign are, in fact, people you should hate. And that's what ought not be missed about the difference between, at least I'm gonna say myself, I can't speak for everyone, but I think most of us who are conservatives, most of us who are Christians or people of faith, versus those on the secular left. We don't hate people. We actually love people. We love people. We want to leave people alone. We believe in natural rights. We believe in life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. We love people. We stridently disagree with lots of people, but we don't hate people. And my concern, again, I say, with the He Gets Us campaign is it was meant to make those of us who oppose secular left-wing politics, we're made out to be the bad guy. We're cruel. Our political beliefs are cruel. Now, Joy Reid's criticism of this, and the same with AOC, is the people behind this are people you should hate. And that's the irony. These people bought an ad that said, Jesus loves the people we hate, and Joy Reid just made a whole monologue about why the people behind this ad are people you should, in fact, hate. And that the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is, you talk about hate, these people are motivated every day they get up out of bed to do nothing but hate their fellow man. And they run around pointing at people saying, you're a hate group, and you're a hate group, and you're a bigot, and you're a hater. When, in fact, hello, what is it? You know, you point one finger and there are four pointing back at you. That's the Southern Poverty Law Center and Joy Reid and AOC and people like them. I don't know the heart, and I was very specifically, purposefully intentional when I said the people behind this ad, I don't know most of them. They are unnamed, as she said. I know the Green family. I think their hearts are well-intended. But I don't ultimately know what motivates this ad campaign and who's behind it. But I think there are a lot of theological problems with it. I confirmed that when I looked over it and talked with some people that I do trust who are very theologically steeped. And I'll have more to say about that in coming writing. I'm going to sit down and write some of my thoughts on this stuff. But I will just say generally, I don't hate anyone behind this thing. I mistrust the messaging, but I can't say I hate anyone behind the message. And she specifically says you shouldn't listen to this message because the people behind it are people you should hate. And I wanted to point out a very distinct difference. But I don't know. I suppose the people that are behind it could say, well, if Stigall can't stand our ad and Joy Reid can't stand our ad, then I guess we must be doing something right. I'm sure there are those that would say that too. That's fine. I just thought it notable. Bob Spinato at Williamsburg Dental. He is a great personal friend of mine, and I just couldn't more highly recommend the guy as a friend and dentist than Bob. Bob is, he's as kind and compassionate a human being as you're ever going to meet. I have heard some terrible stories. In fact, I was just with my cousin this weekend, and he was talking about going to the dentist and how miserable the experience was, how aggressive the dentist was with him. And we were talking about wisdom teeth being removed, as a matter of fact, and he says he still has horrifying memories of the way the dentist treated him. Bob does too, since childhood. He remembers that dentists can be traumatic events, and he hates that so much. The guy is singularly obsessed with your comfort. He's slow, he's deliberate, he takes his time, and he's constantly checking in and asking, are you okay? Are you in any discomfort at all? We're going to take it easy, we're going to take it slow. He does not hurt you, and I know that may be hard to believe for people that have had traumatic dental experiences. It doesn't have to hurt, but you do have to call him to get started. So if it's been a long time since you've been to a dentist, or maybe you want a complete cosmetic overhaul, a whiter, brighter smile, make Bob Spinato at Williamsburg Dental in Broomall, Pennsylvania, just off the Blue Route near Philadelphia. Make him your call. All right. 610-353-2700 is the number. 610-353-2700. If you call and you get a hold of their front desk today, tell them you were listening to the Chris Stigall Show podcast, you'll get a $200 teeth whitening. That's ordinarily a $500 value. He gives it to podcast listeners for just the $200 value. All right. The only condition is you got to go in and meet him. Williamsburg-dental.com or 610-353-2700. I'm really excited to talk with our next guest, Spencer Klavan, who has written a brand new book called How to Save the West, Ancient Wisdom for 5 Modern Crises. He's also at the Daily Wire. He's about to launch a new podcast. And Mr. Klavan, glad to have you on the show, first of all. Welcome in.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Chris.
You bet. What an important book and an important time in history, and I know that's why you wrote it. And I've been sitting on a couple of stories because I knew we were going to talk that I can't wait. I think, I would guess, I haven't read your book yet, but I would guess they're going to be a perfect complement to what you've written about. And I'll just start with something that we've been touching on a little bit here recently, and that is the He Gets Us campaign throughout the course of the Super Bowl. That was getting a lot of attention. I'm also holding in front of me a story about the Church of England, which undoubtedly you covered and know about and probably written about, that the gender-neutral stuff and this transgender stuff generally. Where the church is concerned, where people of faith are concerned, I think that might be, to me, as a Christian, Mr. Klavan, the most alarming and the one people ought to be most on point about. How do you see it?
Well, that's, I think, absolutely right. And at a fundamental level, this is really the heart of my book. It's in the crisis of religion section. What I'm arguing here is that, there are all sorts of things going wrong in the news. You listed them just now at the top. There's plenty of stuff to focus on. But when you dig deeper a little bit beneath the surface of the daily stories, you find that it's not just this or that problem that we're up against politically. It's actually that we're facing some really fundamental questions that humanity has wrestled with basically since the beginning of our time on this planet. Questions like, what is a human being? What's our purpose in this universe? And most importantly, what's our relationship to the highest power, to God? And so that's really what I address in the book. And I address it not by, summarizing the news of the day or looking to modern gurus so much as by digging into these ancient texts, which really do have wisdom for us. They're not dusty books to be left on the shelves. They're actually practical pieces of writing from some of the greatest minds who have ever lived. And the encouraging thing about that is it means we're not alone in facing these kinds of issues. The stories that we're going to get into talking about today are new in that they are coming up, in the recent headlines, but the problems that they face us with are very profound and go back to the beginning of our great Western tradition, which means that we have resources to draw on, especially in the church, for answering back to some of the nonsense that we're seeing, coming out of the Church of England and places like that.
Yeah, I have to say that this is something one of my preachers loves to say often, that God is not surprised by any of this. There's literal biblical history that lays out so much of what we're living today. And my colleague and friend, and I know somebody that most of us really enjoy, Dennis Prager, regularly just opines about what world is without God, people who live the secular life without God versus living with a God, and just sort of that fundamental baseline. Now we've gotten to a place where we're just operating from a fundamental baseline. Do you live a life with God or a belief in something bigger or not? And I know you tackle that in this book. Fundamentally, that's a huge directional issue.
Well, what I argue in the book is actually there's really no such thing as living a life without God. There's only such a thing as telling yourself that you're not worshiping. There's a line in the Bible in the Psalms that says, "The fool hath said in his heart, there is no God." And sometimes I think we skip over that line, or we just read it and say, oh, yeah, this just means that it's dumb not to believe in God, or atheists are dumb, or something like that. But actually, I think the scripture is saying something much more profound there. It's saying, if you tell yourself that you don't worship, if you tell yourself there's nothing in the position of highest good for you, then you're fooling yourself. You're making yourself into a fool, because everybody, just by getting out of bed in the morning, they do something because they believe in a good. They want something. They want to do something or pursue some justice. And that means that somewhere in your mind, there's a highest good, something that you serve, something you will ultimately bend the knee to. And if it's not God, if you're not self-aware as a worshiper of God, then you're just going to be worshiping something else unawares. And this is what we see all over our news in our culture now, all the time. When people talk about, for instance, the science, capital T, capital S, and they say, Dr. Fauci kind of represents the science, and he's the priest, essentially, of a cult religion. And you see this also, in Black Lives Matter rallies, when people kneel and beg for forgiveness or absolution. This is the religious impulse in the human heart making itself known, even as we claim to be secular. So the point of the book is to say, well, if we're all worshiping, if we're always worshiping something, what is worthy of our worship? What is the thing we can worship, or the person we can worship who will set us free rather than enslaving us? And the answer to that question is not to be found from the CDC or the WEF. It's actually to be found in Scripture and the wisdom literature of the tradition that comes down to us from Jerusalem and the Church Fathers.
And by the way, there are a lot, I won't say a lot, I know a few conservatives, and I just got into a back and forth with somebody who identifies as a libertarian, and he was this staunch Second Amendment guy. He had Second Amendment in his byline in his social media, Second Amendment this and Second Amendment that, and don't tread on me. But a secularist, atheist, in fact, he thought he was mocking my belief in God. And I said, where do you think the Second Amendment, what are natural rights? I just said, I tried to get him to tell me what are natural rights, define them. And it really tripped him up. And this, it's central to what we believe as Americans, is it not? That there's certain things that are endowed, given, gifted, not by man. And if you don't believe that, well, then don't beat your chest about the Second Amendment if you think it's just something a guy came up with, because if you think that, then you can have it taken away just as easily by some other guy, right?
That is quite true, and it's something all of our founders were aware of and explicit about in many cases. I mean, the Declaration's line about the Creator endowing us with inalienable rights, that sentence doesn't make any sense if the word creator doesn't mean anything, if it's just a kind of vague gesture toward empty nothing. These convictions that we have in this country, that mankind is born into this world in the image of God with individual rights endowed by his creator, and nobody therefore can take them away, not any man, not any government, nobody. That conviction doesn't just drop out of the sky. It's not actually just common sense. If you study the history of mankind, most people have not believed these sorts of things. Most people have not believed in human equality and God-given rights. These things come from somewhere, and the place that they come primarily is from our scriptural sources, from the idea of the image of God invested in every human being, and that tradition, which kind of merges with the tradition of Athens, the Greek and Roman philosophies, as it spreads out across Europe. That's a specific and precious inheritance. It's not something that we can just get, naturally because everybody believes it. And in fact, as people move away from those sources of wisdom, you're starting to see them revert back to the old kind of pagan tribalism. Black people are inherently better than white people, or white people are inherently racist, and men are inherently sexist. These sorts of old-fashioned atavistic ideas that present themselves as new innovations, but they're really just what happens when you take that pillar of faith away. That's the kind of natural state of man that we're reverting to without this core wisdom that comes down to us from the great texts.
Spencer Klavan's book is called How to Save the West, Ancient Wisdom for 5 Modern Crises. Spencer, the study that just came out from the CDC yesterday was talking about how young girls in particular are more depressed than ever, depression generally, suicide, the COVID thing, drug and alcohol dependence. It's an emptiness. It's a lack of meaning. I would fold in there this surge, what seems to be a surge anyway, in this transgender movement. My identity, I don't identify as a boy anymore. I'm now a girl. This insatiable hunger to turn our young children into these transgender figures. That all seems rooted in that same kind of theme that you've written about, a lack of meaning. Is that about right?
I think so. You mentioned the Church of England's move toward gender-neutral pronouns for God. And I think that's really telling, especially when we start talking about this big uptick we've had in gender dysphoria, especially among girls feeling uncomfortable with their bodies. They present this stuff often as if, we don't want male pronouns because that's oppressive and it excludes women, essentially. But actually, it seems like this whole thing kind of trends toward the gender-neutral, just empty, kind of featureless idea of the divine that's not particular in any way, that has no form or personality or characteristic. It's this disgust that we have with our own physical selves, with the fact that we are born into bodies with specific traits and characteristics. And what would be better, we seem to think nowadays, is just to kind of float up into this abstracted space, maybe in the digital cloud or some pure land of soul, just separated from body. And what I show in the book is that is a very, very ancient impulse, and it never really leads in a good direction. Because the fact of the matter is that our bodies are not just accidents, and the reality of who we are in space and time is not something to just be kind of wished away or remolded the way we sometimes do in these terrible, attempts to perform surgery or inject hormones into people. That's the reason that's unhealthy is because what we actually are is embodied souls. We are spirits written into flesh. And that's not a mistake or an accident. It's actually what we believe God used to express himself in the world, in the incarnation of Jesus Christ. And so it's, in fact, the highest thing you can be is a specific person born into a body with a sex. You don't have an abstracted imaginary gender identity that you can reconfigure your body to match. We are always flesh in spirit and spirit in flesh. The two things are joined together, and that's a beautiful thing. It's not something to be shunned or disgusted about. And I argue in the book that you can read, not just Thomas Aquinas and the Church Fathers, but Greek philosophers like Aristotle, for instance, who really argue this very powerfully and show that what we are is souls in bodies, embodied souls, and that's a good thing.
Man, that is so profound and important. We are not an accident. Gender, your person, it's a gift. And the concept that God made a mistake and you can go back to your birth certificate and erase it away, it's as arrogant as saying you can control the weather. But as you point out, it's not like it's new to us. I mean, this goes back for since time immemorial, does it not?
It does, and there is a certain sense in which it is understandable. I can really understand why, given that we live in a fallen world and people die and our bodies break down in all these tragic ways, it's easy to feel as if this is just an encumbrance. It's just a burden that has been placed upon us. And as you're indicating, that's a very, very old feeling. It goes back at least to the Neoplatonists, who were a series of philosophers that kind of followed off of Plato. I talk in the book about Plotinus as one of them, who his biographer said he seemed ashamed of being in the body. And I think that, it's very, very easy, especially now with all this digital technology. People are airbrushing their images so that they look so perfect. And it's easy for regular human beings to look at their flesh and feel inadequate or uncomfortable. And that's one reason why it's become more urgent now and not less to return to a sounder tradition, which is what the Greeks called hylomorphism, the fusion of form and matter is what that word means. And actually, that's a closer truth. That's closer to the truth of what we are, that we are a fusion of those two things. And our salvation, our virtue, our excellence is found not in rejecting our bodies, but in trying to live out the guidance of our spirit through and in our bodies. That's a saner way forward.
Yes. It's it's living here, but not being of it. It's getting up every day with a purpose that's beyond just going to work or just your identity. Tucker has covered this quite a bit too. I know Spencer Klavan, the crisis of young men not working, just sitting at home on video games and having no real aspirations at all. It's so sad, and it all seems to go back to the same root.
It's very sad, and, it's something that often comes out of, people will present it as a kind of offer of liberation. You don't have to work anymore. You can just, sit in your virtual reality space and imagine the world however you want it to be. But one of the things that Tucker, I think, shows really well is that taking away that physical reality, taking away the meaning in our life that doesn't take us out of our bodies, but actually takes us deeper into the meaning of ourselves, of our embodied life, of our relationships with one another. That's actually the whole point of why we're here. And if you don't believe that, if you don't believe that your life in the world points towards some higher meaning, then you have no reason to get up out of bed in the morning, which is why what we're seeing, as you say, it's very sad, and it's also very unnecessary, in part because we've been deprived of access to the tradition and the literature that might teach us something better. We've been taught that it's superstitious or primitive or even worse, somehow chauvinist or racist or sexist to go back to this canonical tradition of Western literature. It's simply not so. That's a narrative that's designed to keep you from ever cracking the spine of one of these great books and discovering that, there are friends available here on the shelves for you to find a better way forward, to wake up in the morning with a purpose that doesn't take you out of your body, doesn't take you out of your life or your relationships, but actually guides you through them into the world of the spirit, which we access through the here and now by doing what is good, by seeking truth, goodness, and beauty as we are given to see them every day and in every way we can.
What a smart... I can't wait to get into this book, Spencer Klavan. It's called How to Save the West, Ancient Wisdom for 5 Modern Crises. I don't know if you see it this way, but I'll end on a positive, and your book is literally called How to Save the West, so you can confirm it. Maybe if you say there's a different way, tell me. But I'm noticing, while there is a real schism in many churches, secular progressivism has certainly even permeated the church, sadly, and so you're starting to see most mainline Protestant churches, including the Methodist Church, is about to split. I have a story in here, the FBI warning against radical traditionalist Catholic ideology. So there's a schism in the church, but I will say, for instance, Bible-based churches like mine, one that I've found, I left an old church, I've come to a new one, and it's grown. It's growing, and I'm hearing that from a lot of people who are going back to traditional Bible-based beliefs, at least in the Christian faith, I can't speak to other faiths, they're growing. So while there's a splintering, it seems to be there's a healthy growth amongst the traditionalists. Are you hearing that? And do you think that's a positive development and possibly a way back?
Absolutely. I do have hope. If I didn't, I wouldn't have written the book, as you suggest. And what I find as I sort of assess our current situation is, a lot of things are going wrong, but it also means that there is this enormous hunger, and maybe that's what you're seeing also in the church, this longing for something real, something tangible that nevertheless isn't reducible purely to just biology or material facts. And I argue in the book that thing is what the Greeks would have called philia, which is a form of love. And it's a form of love that can be practiced in friendships and in neighborhoods. It's a political form of love because it means we can form communities around our common goal as fellow Americans. But it also goes deeper than that into a spiritual level of connection that we share when we worship in church together. And so, yes, I have a lot of hope for that. The more we offer that philia, that love, I think the more people will flock to it.
What an important book. I hope we can have you back. I'm so thankful to you that you wrote it. It just, it sounds like what the country needs right now.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I'll happily come back anytime. And I look forward to hearing how you enjoy the book.
The new podcast, by the way, is that coming soon?
That'll be out soon at Daily Wire Plus, yes.
Awesome.
We're working on it now. I'm really looking forward to that.
That's you're joining a great mothership of thinkers there. We're glad to hear it. Spencer Klavan, come back and see us. The book again, How to Save the West: Ancient Wisdom for 5 Modern Crises. Thank you, sir. It really is. The jingle is true. For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit MyPillow.com. I'm sleeping like a baby. I can't lie about it. I mean, I have this MyPillow body pillow I use every single night. Tuck it under the blankets, lay next to me. I know, not very romantic on Valentine's Day, but most of us that have been married and you're sleeping nightly, after a while, people sleep hot. I don't know about you. I get hot. I need space. But MyPillow, what's so great about MyPillow and their new MyPillow 2.0 technology is it's exactly for people that sleep hot. So I get this side sleeping thing where I just can't sleep on my back or my stomach. I like sleeping on the side. Maybe you do too. This body pillow they make, like, it doesn't get hot, but it is so supportive, and it's like 3 feet long. So it's just perfect to lay your head on. You can tuck it in between your knees to take a little pressure off the lower back or the knees. I love it. Plus, I'm on these Giza Dream Sheets, which are crazy comfortable. We've got the towels, which are super absorbent. We dry off with every morning, thanks to MyPillow.com. My dog, Dean, is on the MyPillow bed for the dog. Loves it. And that's just some of the products. Right now, I'm sipping my coffee. Mike has his own line of coffee. I got the light brew. I think next time I'm going to order the dark brew and try that. But all of these products and so many more, from the robes to the slippers, Christine loves her MyPillow slippers. You got to check it out. And if you go to MyPillow.com and order today, you use my promo code ChrisPodcast. ChrisPodcast. That allows you to save up to 66% on everything on the website. And it also lets them know that you listen to the podcast, which means a lot to me. They're advertising with me in the hopes to reach you. I know you're going to love the products, but when you let them know Chris Podcast, it gets you the discount and lets them know you listen. So thanks for that. It's a 3-legged stool. Hopefully everybody wins. So MyPillow.com, promo code Chris, or for the best customer service, you should know everything you order, 60-day money-back guarantee, a 10-year warranty. So they're really high-quality products and made here in the United States. So 800-932-5056 to order in person, 800-932-5056, or MyPillow.com, promo code Chris.
The Chris Stigall Show Podcast.